Next up we have Rebecca Hickson. Rebecca is from Massey University. She completed a PhD in dystocia and beef heifers in 2009. She is from the East Coast sheep and beef farming, and Rebecca is leading our dairy beef project at the moment. So thank you.
Thank you, Graham. All right, so today I'm going to talk about beef opportunities in the dairy industry. And I think the really important place to start is by reminding you that actually the dairy industry is about milk. So it's all very well to say, oh, you know, we can turn a $50 bobby calf into a $150 white-faced 4-day-old. But actually, for your average dairy farm in 2012, 93.5% of their income came from milk. And livestock sales, by comparison, were less than 6%. That included cull cows, not just calves. So, even though beef bulls result in a higher value calf, something like 70% of dairy farmers believe that using beef semen would increase calving difficulty. We know that increased calving difficulty decreases milk yield. So, you can add value to the calf, but if by doing so you reduce milk yield of the cow, you're very quickly undoing any additional value from the beef bull. So, you know, this is where the sums sit for the dairy industry. And I've had multiple conversations with farmers who say, no, it's just not worth it because what it might do for our milk yield. Now, 70% of dairy farmers believe using a beef bull increases the rate of calving difficulty. I gave a talk at Limestone Downs recently about the project and what we were doing, and one of the things that came up was that we've put Hereford and Angus bulls over the heifers. And there were several hands went up and said, are you actually crazy? You know, that's going to be a disaster. And I explained, well, actually, we've gone out and we've selected bulls that are about the easiest calving bulls we could come up with. They're light birth weight, they're easy calving, and actually we think we're okay to put them across heifers. And then several more hands went up, and the questions were like, well, it's okay for you scientist types to find bulls like that, but where's an ordinary farmer going to find them? And I thought, well, we bought them at a bull sale, and the public's welcome there. So it was a real eye-opener for me that this is where the level of understanding sits, that they're not aware that these bulls are available for anybody, not just scientist types. So I thought that was a really enlightening question. Now, I said before how milk's a huge part of the dairy farmer's paycheck. Well, you're well aware of what the headlines are saying at the moment about the milk price. You might also be aware of what feeder calves are selling for in the current or the autumn calves, and it's expected with the price of weaners that that's going to continue through in spring. So dairy farmers are looking for alternative ways to boost income, and feeder calves are actually returning some money right now. So potentially, here's an opportunity to change that perception. If we can put bulls out there that are not going to cause calving difficulty, then it's an opportunity to change people's minds and to change that perception about using dairy beef. So what is the dairy farmer looking for in a beef bull? Easy calving, number one. Short gestation ranks for a lot of farmers. Bearing in mind, if you're running a beef bull with your cows, they're usually the later calvers, so any opportunity to bring them to be earlier calvers is good for many reasons. There's also interest in calves that are distinctive, whether that's so that the farmer knows when they're picked up off the ground and in the paddock, these are my replacements and these are my beef crosses. And if those calves are then sold through the sale, it's nice to be able to make them really identifiable as beef cross calves. Now, from a finishing perspective, most dairy beef calves are born in the last 4 weeks of calving in the dairy industry. So around here, that means September, October. They are predominantly steers and bulls, but also heifers get reared, and they're hand reared to 100 kilos. Now, the dairy beef calf is being September, October born, is 100 kilos, 12 weeks old, in about the middle of December. Now, that lines up pretty nicely with when all our pasture turns to stalky summer rubbish. And so there's a challenge for these later born dairy beef calves of getting through that first summer and gaining enough weight that they can be finished before that second winter. So from a finishing perspective, there's interest in live weight and growth rate, and then ultimately carcass and meat quality. And it's quite distinctively not the same wish list that a dairy farmer would write. But if we can produce calves that please both players, the dairy side and the beef side, then the dairy beef industry is going to go forward at a rate of knots. Now, there's a couple more things to point out. So in 2007-8 dairy season, there were 4 million or thereabouts dairy cows. 1.8 million Friesians, 1.3 million crossbreds, and just over 500,000 jerseys. In the 2014-15 season, there were 5 million dairy cows. About the same number of Friesians, about the same number of jerseys, and an extra million crossbred cows. So the expansion of the dairy industry has been more crossbred cows. So whatever the dairy beef industry looks like, it's going to have to involve crossbred cows. All right, so at Limestone Downs, we are in the first year of a dairy beef progeny test. We've used Hereford and Angus bulls, and we used them over the heifers. We also use Jersey bulls over the heifers so that there's a Jersey Hereford Angus comparison in the heifers. And then over the cows, they allowed us to mate their entire dairy herd, so they're going to source replacements externally. And so the whole dairy herd was inseminated for 9 weeks to Hereford and Angus bulls. So most of our bulls are what we call high merit bulls. They have good calving ease, they have respectable birth weight, they have short gestation length, they have good growth rates at 400 and 600 days, and many of them score pretty highly for IMF as well. We've put in there a collection of bulls with figures that reflect your typical unrecorded Angus, Hereford and Jersey bull. Those bulls are recorded, but they're selected so that they would reflect the unrecorded population. The cows are currently pregnant, and there will be another mating shortly in 2016. Now, the sort of things we're looking to measure, so we'll be following the cows in this herd as much as the calves. So we're answering those questions around, has being mated to a beef bull caused problems for the cow? Do particular bulls result in decreases in milk yield or not? So the cows will be measured. We'll look at calving ease, we'll look at rebreeding, and we'll look at their milk yield. The calves will be picked up at birth, brought into the calf shed where they'll be weighed. We'll look at their calf rearing. So the system there is to wean calves off meal at 100 days, off milk at around 60-65 kilos. Wean calves off meal at 100 kilos, not days. So the measurement there will be how many days is it taking us to get these calves to weaning. Then we'll be looking at post-weaning growth, carcass traits, and ultimately meat quality. There are bulls in common between the dairy beef progeny test and the beef progeny test. So we'll be able to look at things like, do the same bulls perform well in both systems? And are all the breeding values that we're generating in a beef herd transferable to dairy beef? And one that I think is of particular interest there would be 200-day weight. So we're measuring these on calves that have spent 6 months on their mum in a beef herd, and then we're saying, well, how well is that going to predict growth rate for a calf that is early weaned and weaned off milk at 60-65 kilos? And the herd that we've got there is a mixture of Holstein Friesian and crossbred cows, and all the calves will be identified to the dams so that we can look at the influence of the dams as well. I don't have a heck of a lot else to say calving starts in July, and once it happens, we'll start generating some results. Any questions?
Just real quick, will you look at conception rate at all, beef versus dairy in those herds?
Not so much as beef versus Jersey. The only place that we've got the Jersey comparison is amongst the heifers. And this year the conception rate amongst the heifers was 99 point something in all the groups. There was about 7 empties. And several of those were Fremantins. So
Yeah, just the other question is, how about death loss afterwards? Will you compare crossbreeds?
yeah, so any deaths will be recorded, yeah.
Another one here?
Rebecca, you might have answered this and I missed it, but were the bulls recorded for single sire mating? Like, will you know which bull produces which calf, or just breeds?
So the cows were all inseminated. So yes, they recorded which cow was used. The heifers were mob mated, so we had a mob that went to Hereford, a mob that went to Angus, and a mob that went to Jersey, but we will DNA verify to individual sites.
Thanks very much.
There's one down here.
Oh, one more.
You're unrecorded, you say, I mean, well, not the unrecorded, so the lesser bulls, as it were, the sort of ones that were recorded but supposed to be an average, were they breed average for the current EBVs, or were they below breed average?
So you saw Charles' graph before that showed that the commercial population lags behind the breeder population. And beef, that's by about 7 years. So we went back 7 years and said, what did the breeder population look like 7 years ago, and picked bulls that matched that.